Welcome. You are listening to Sharegiving Secrets with Deborah Greenhut. If you are a family caregiver or expect to be one, and you want to maintain your well-being while caring, then you are in the right place. I am your host, Deborah Greenhut, speaker, author, and rational caregiver advocate. I'm a family caregiving veteran, bringing you survival secrets and experiences from experts who share the goal of doing less by managing more. We need to invent and reinvent family care, and together we're going to do it. My big idea is rational caregiving, and my motto is, let your brain lead your heart. Please share yours in the comments. Sharegiving Secrets, because friends don't let friends be caregivers alone. Let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Sharegiving Secret, where we try to explore new solutions and help each other to survive caregiving. My guest today is Kristina Jensen, who has a fascinating background that I think is going to be tremendously helpful to talking about caregiving. And it's an angle I haven't explored very much. So I'm going to say hello to Kristina and let her introduce herself and all the many hats that she's worn that are pertinent to the caregivers around us. Hi, Kristina.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on. You mentioned I wear several hats, and I do. So my first love is being a pastor, and I've been a pastor for the past 20 years in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. So we ordained women about 50 years ago. So there's different paths in the Lutheran Church, and this is the only church that does ordain women pastors. And in addition to that, I am a sales and enrollment strategist. So I help online coaches and course creators sell their high ticket programs. And that has given me a really interesting window into what in life is enrollment and what does it mean to really acknowledge and give witness to another person in general, right? Um, and what is it to see, to hear, to acknowledge the person who is right in front of us? I've also been a hospice chaplain. So caregiving is incredibly close to my heart. When my dad was in hospice, I flew out and spent 5 weeks with him and my sister in the last moments of his life. So there's so many ways in which the not only the information that you provide, but the care, the delicacy, and the ministry that you hold with your community, Deborah, it's just so sacred. So I first want to acknowledge you in the work that you do, the community that you've created, and the space that you allow people to simply show up and be not compartmentalized, but all of who they are, because that's really what we need to heal and to be healing in this world. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Kristina. I didn't expect that at the end, and I really appreciate that mutual recognition that you're expressing. And I love that you said we all want to be listened to and we want to be acknowledged. We want to be seen for who we
Yes,
are and what we're doing. And I think everyone wants that probably, but
absolutely.
caregivers especially, because it's
Yes.
almost a kind of servitude to be devoted to someone
Mhm.
24/7. It
Yeah.
turns out that, caregivers donate about $660 billion worth of unpaid labor
Mm.
in the US alone every single year. And I think it's something like 300, almost 400 billion hours are devoted to caregiving. And that really blows my mind. It's a staggering amount in both cases for what caregivers have to be exposed to. And your concept of enrollment is also fascinating to me
Yeah.
because it's a type of engagement in both
Mhm.
cases that's more so than, okay, I got a new job.
Mhm.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah.
Exactly. So can you say a bit more about that aspect of it? How do you
Absolutely.
prepare to enroll someone?
Yeah. So So there's sales, right? And then there's enrollment. So in sales, it's thought of as a transactional word. And so the word that I like to use applies to all of life, really, which is enrollment. And my definition of enrollment, Deborah, is when you create a vision for what you want, and you invite somebody into that vision in such a powerful way that they take a step of action towards that vision. And who is in that more than the caregiver, right? I mean, you're doing that with medical appointments with the doctors. You're doing that with family members. I would imagine that the most difficult conversations with that are our fellow family members, right? People who you want to be engaged in the care, and it's like, how do I get them to XYZ, right? Those are the difficult conversations I know from talking with parishioners, from my own friends, from my own involvement, right? Um, but any any conversation or any situation in which you want to communicate what you know is possible, how do you do that in a way that engages more people than yourself? That's enrollment. And so all of life, in a sense, is enrollment.
That's so
All of
fascinating.
caregiving
Yeah.
is enrollment, right?
Absolutely. I wanted to touch back on something that you said. You mentioned the family, and I think sometimes that's the hardest layer of enrollment to
Totally.
accomplish. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah. Families carry so much of who we are, who we hold ourselves to be, who we hope we're not, and an acknowledgement of who we really are. There's so many trauma triggers in families that really pull at us. And so when we think of being able to calm ourselves down in the act of enrollment, I encourage people to create safe spaces in the active enrollment conversation. So, for example, what I know about transformation is that we need to feel physically and emotionally safe in order for change to occur. And so, when you're about to have a difficult conversation with a family member, with a friend, with a doctor, if you can just take 3 deep breaths and remember, I am safe. I am sacred. I'm intelligent. Then remember the central point that you want to communicate. Write that down.
Mm.
And then just hold energetically, what do you want the other person to feel in the conversation? Start there. And what that does, Deborah, is it energetically opens up a space that the person can feel, which creates openness, which creates safety, which just creates a possibility for transformation that wasn't there before you opened it. I've seen miracles happen.
Mm.
I've seen miracles. I've experienced it. And what that does for you is it reminds you that you have the power to generate safety, that you have the power to generate possibility, that you are the author of your own experience wherever you go. And in situations where there's some things that you just don't have a lot of control over, to remember that you can create a field of psychological safety around yourself, that's powerful.
Yes, I imagine that would be, and certainly a much better frame of mind to enter the caregiving situation with. I know in my experience, a lot of families are adversarial to
Yeah,
start, and
absolutely.
it,
Absolutely.
so they just
Absolutely.
can't find that mutual feeling
No,
that you really need in order to set up this kind of collaboration, which is
absolutely.
maybe the most important one of your life, and you don't realize it even at the start. But it is your family. It's your strongest bond, most likely. And
It is.
we need to be able to set aside the trivial things so that we can open that space. I'm so glad that you posed it that way. I know that you have had experience also as a hospice chaplain, and I think that's an area that is more unfamiliar to most
Yeah.
people. Hospice has become more of a more common experience for people
Hmm.
now. And it seems to me from the outside looking in, because I did not have that, that having that space and that guide at the same time has made such a difference in the way people
Yeah.
make their transitions. Can you talk about how families should approach that moment?
Absolutely. So, and just to clarify a little, Deborah, do you mean the moment of of having hospice come in, or the moment of, is that what you is that what you mean?
We could start with that because I've seen it.
Okay.
It's not always a smooth entry. It
Yeah.
depends how a physician or hospital staff choose to explain it if you happen to be in a hospital, or how a physician takes the time to say this is what the crafted experience is going to look like, and maybe they don't. So for people who are not familiar with it, that might be a very helpful starting place.
Yeah. So there's two types of towards end of life care, right? So there's palliative care, which is when it's in kind of that gray area where when things are not certain, when there's possibility for recovery, but when there's that gray area. And what hospice means is really that there's a terminal diagnosis, and certain conditions can be met. People have been in hospice for 2 years. People have been in hospice for 2 days. So there's quite a wide array. But what I think of hospice now really is that it gives you more options. So for example, instead of your loved one having to go to the doctor to get everything, everybody comes to your loved one. So what it provides is it gives, so for example, one person that I know, a friend of the congregation, she just entered hospice care, and what she talked about was how much more energy she has because she's not spending all her time on doctor's visits. So the gift that it allows is for you to simply be present with your family member as a family member rather than as a taxi. Present with your family member as somebody who you can have those conversations with rather than worrying about the logistics of how everything is going to get done. What it isn't is it isn't 24-hour care. So some of those logistics still have to be worked out depending on the care level and where the person is. There's some places that do offer in-house hospice, like you know, where my dad was, where it was more of a 24-hour center. And then there's some people who go in the home and hospice comes in the home. So there's different levels of care within hospice. But it just provides a level of peace, and it opens you up to more services that you can receive. Everything from nurses to social work to aides coming in and helping with baths and things like that to chaplaincy, which is meant to provide help and support with whatever the person views as meaningful to them. So it's not necessarily Christian. And I just want to emphasize that it's meant to serve whatever is meaningful for you and really remind you of the strength of that support system in a time when you're really looking at, hey, what has been meaningful to me? What do I want to really remember? What do I want to pass on as my legacy? What would be really meaningful to me to have around me in this particular time in my life?
Yeah, I'm so glad you made that distinction between palliative and hospice care, because some people don't know, are not familiar with the word
Yeah.
palliative, so they don't understand what's going to happen
Hmm.
there. And it sounds like hospice might be the closest thing to that fantasy of dying at home in bed,
Hmm. It
surrounded
is.
by your loved ones, which
Absolutely.
what is so preferable to a tangle of tubes and people monitoring what is not happening anymore. So
It really is.
there's a real gift involved there if you're able to come by that service. And I know there are some versions of service that might be supported by Medicare or by other programs that are available. And then sometimes some services are out of reach for people. Um, so that brings up the financial aspect of this. We can't avoid the practical part, which some.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. And what I love is that hospice is included in Medicaid. And there is what you'll find is in my experience with hospice, both as seeing it as I was a hospice chaplain, but also seeing my congregation members' experience with hospice, is there are far more things covered on hospice when somebody gets to that stage where they're eligible for it, that it is a big sigh of relief financially and all the other way around. So it's something to absolutely consider, asking if there can be an evaluation. And the evaluation is pretty, it's maybe a 45-minute hour conversation that is simply a series of questions, that you, the caregiver, would be present for with the patient, that would be really supportive. And it's simply an evaluation. It's not costing anything for you, but it can provide some incredible opportunity for care and for comfort if it's something that you qualify for.
I know a very good friend of mine was not aware that her spouse was eligible for any kind of program,
Mhm.
and
Oh,
she had steeled herself to understand. She knew he was dying and that he
yeah.
probably would die at home, and she thought she could live with all of what that was going to
Oh
be
my
like.
goodness.
And I said, he's mentioning a doctor. Maybe they made some arrangement about a conversation. You should at least call
Mhm.
the doctor. Well, I can't afford anymore. I can't. And finally
Yeah.
she did. And the hospital had a whole wing and she could stay with him there.
Oh,
Vision for her to basically live
wow.
with him until he passed away. And what a
Amazing.
difference. What a difference.
Yeah.
But if we don't ask and follow up on these things, we are not going to know. So
We
it's
don't know. Yeah.
stay in touch with the services that exist. So I'm sorry this went so fast.
Oh
Um,
my goodness, it did. Yeah.
we're close to the end of our time, and I wanted to make space for you to talk with our listeners about how they can reach you if they're interested in following up with any of your services. And I will put everything in the show notes, but share a bit now about the connections we can make with you.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. So I really have two parts of my personality in a sense, but um, one part is really helping online coaches and course creators connect with people on a deeper level in being able to offer what they have in a sales conversation. And the other part is as pastor, but really where it comes together, Deborah, is in being present with people, whatever that means. And so, if you're listening and you're also a coach or a course creator, and you'd like to know how to be present with people in the sales conversation, I would say find me on Instagram at Christina Lee Jensen, Kristinaalee Jensen. Um, and if you just want to follow along with a good church and follow along with the pastoral element, it's St. John's Lutheran. So STJOHNS Lutheran in Saxville, Wisconsin, which is a tiny town, Deborah, where there's more trees and deer than people. And Saxville is Saxeville. We're going to start to stream our services, so my sermons will be on there and people can connect that way too.
Oh, that's wonderful. So glad
Yeah.
for the internet. It's really going to help us with a lot of these human situations that before many people found themselves isolated. I
Yeah.
knew that if I came to talk with you, I would not feel isolated anymore. So I hope that many
Thank you.
listeners will reach out to you and find you. So I want to thank you for being a wonderful interview guest today. I really appreciated the time you took to be here. And is there any last thing you'd like to share with the audience before we sign off?
Just know how incredibly sacred you are and how much a difference you are making. And in those times where you feel like nobody can see you, know that the source of life honors you deeply.
That is a beautiful thought. Thanks again, Kristina. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
Likewise, thank you so much, Deborah.
Thanks, listeners. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me today on the Sharegiving Secret, How to Survive Family Caregiving. I love sharing these insights and stories to empower you on your caregiving journey. If today's conversation resonated with you, consider diving deeper by picking up a copy of my pamphlet, Non-Negotiables for Caregivers. It's filled with great strategies to help you think through how to maintain your well-being while caregiving. Nobody wants to become Carezilla, right? Visit sharegiving.net to get this resource that can help you navigate your caregiver path with grace and resilience. Let's continue to share our stories and support each other. Until next time, keep sharing, keep caring, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. Thank you.